There's something quite interesting about the aestheticization of. I wonder if maybe some of you could comment on this. There should be a microphone you can pass along on the floor there. Aesthetic seems crucially and centrally important to a lot of you. Some of it is a byproduct of the function, nature of the material, and the cork, etc. But I just wondered, and yet for you with your bricks as well, massive issue. The architects don't like it. It was boring. It's dull. It's prosaic. So I just wondered about the aestheticization of what you do as a company, because cork is technically renewable. It's bark, isn't it, off a tree? But actually, you must put a lot of effort into making sure it was acceptable and it was palatable for the consumer. So I just wondered if you could comment on that process.
Well, the way we position Corkbrick is as a structure or the basis for any object of structure that you create. So even for people that don't like the colors, for instance, of the cork, they can add up new materials, new covers, or even glass to make it more appealing in terms of aesthetics. So Corkbrick is not a solution for everything. It's a base for creating new spaces and objects that can change very dynamically, because it's the first thing that you have something that today can be a wall, tomorrow can be a bench, and in the next day could be a table. And then you can cover and add other materials to make it more appealing depending on your taste or your application. So
I would urge you to look at the website, actually, because I looked at it, and just to comment, I didn't get that from the presentation. And when I looked at your website earlier, I thought this is really great.
Yeah.
And I thought that modularity and stuff was excellent. But there's inherent qualities and aesthetic properties within what you're doing that enable that kind of attraction to it as well.
It is, but by coincidence, at least in our point of view, aesthetically it looks nice. But there are other characteristics in the material, like you said in the beginning. It's fully renewable, it's natural, and obviously sustainable. That offers unique applications that you don't have in other material invented by man or natural ones. So it's a question of having something that for the first time is dynamic. It has a dynamic application according to our lives. We have now Airbnb or co-working spaces, and you can adjust. Actually, Corkbrick started by a problem in my family. I have 4 kids, as you said, and sometimes I had more than 10 guests at home, and I wanted to find out a solution that when I have kids sleeping at home, I could create comfortable rooms for them, and when they leave, everything goes back to normal. And there is nothing in the market, because normally we tend to create an object, and that object will have that personality forever. And in the case of Corkbrick, it's like Lego. One day can be one thing, the other day can be another thing, and there is no skills that you need to have to build it.
And I just wonder, Zoe, just a quick comment, because the aesthetic qualities of what the companies perceive was actually a detriment to the then potential recycling material they call jazz, don't they, with it when it gets that inclusion in it. So, there's always that battle, that tension between the market acceptability or perceived market acceptability and then the ability to recycle and recover.
There must be some clever graph that could plot that trajectory of, you're so new, you need to make yourself, you have to have an aesthetic that is the thing that someone buys into and that signifies they've made the good choice. Like, you've got to look enough like something that someone will feel virtuous for having, because they need it to not look like other things. Then it can't look, but it can't be so fashionable that then what if it goes out of fashion and everyone stops buying your thing? And then there's the problem, the burden of choice is the minute you can change it. I chose plastic as an example because it really is that ultra versatile. It will be what you want it to be, and the properties of the plastic are secondary to what you want it to be like. Whereas actually there are some properties you can't get around, and you have to think that there are reasons why you might have to say no. You can never have it like that. Like, it has to be like a single-use plastic bottle you would find in your bathroom that might have shampoo in. I can imagine a time when it is illegal for it to be any other colour than white, because you have to accept that there's and something else much bigger than you love pink in your bathroom, and you wouldn't dare have anything not pink. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
a pearlised polypropylene pink. Champagne.
yeah.
But the government's waste strategy's got a 30% supposed de minimis for packaging. Extended producer responsibilities coming in, so maybe things will move that way. But I do
not quick enough.
But I have a bit of an issue about. Well, I could be here for hours arguing. But there's this whole dumbing down, and companies need to realise that they need to sell things. They need to appeal to us aesthetically, but within the context of what might be better for the environment. Because you've still taken quite an extreme view on that.
To try and provoke a conversation, because I think it is an extreme problem, and I think. Probably for too long we've had it our own way, really, and I think we all know, if you look at a photo of yourself 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I wore those trousers or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, the problem, I could never get at a tattoo because I can't really make that sort of aesthetic commitment. Do you know? Really, I will probably not like it at some point. Like we all, that's such a sort of human characteristic that. And our tastes can change and be educated and evolve. And
there's a great anthropologist, Daniel Miller, who was at UCL. But the people buy things for ritual, status, mimicry, and meaning, and that's what's embodied in a lot of products. So there's a provocation. Maybe we need a pint in our hands.
But that whole owning of a thing in the first place, there's lots of stuff that will come up in other sessions.
I was going to pick on that about the system thinking of that. Well, why not have a milk bottle? I've just moved to reusable bottles, which we used to have in the 70s, and it's come back again. So there's a whole load of other stuff there.
But it needs to be at a scale. Like my parents still get their milk in the glass milk bottle, but you have to do it at a scale that sadly could only really be done by like an Amazon, right? Which is your supermarket shopping. Everything you buy, you should have only 4 types of container. There's the squat square one, there's the tall liquidy one, there's the round whatever-y one, and all stuff comes in those and then gets delivered to you and collected from you, and then you build that sort of mammoth thing that can deal with the way we live now. But it also means you have to subscribe to being like an Amazon food person. So it's also horrific. So anyway.
And just before we come on to Ehab, just one quick point, because I want to open it up. But it seems to me that you're making it aesthetically pleasing in order to then get that interest in developing the technology further. Yeah. Because it doesn't have the structural properties yet, maybe, to be fully functional.
Yeah, I mean, for us, there are 2 types of clients. There's the client that absolutely loves the aesthetic of the natural material and wants that to shine, and we usually get a lot more of those. And there's also a client that wants to hide it away and cover it in paint. I think we need to be a bit empathetic with the client and understand that people are used to things being in a particular way for so long, and to change that overnight is quite difficult. So what we're able to do is advise and encourage the client to use our natural pigmentation to color it and make it look exactly like a plastic piece of material would look, but it's still natural and done in the most natural way. Just never move away from that ethos and philosophy, and try and encourage and change the minds of the clients. Successfully, we've done that, and I think it's a way to make sure that change happens in a mainstream way.
And I'm going to come to you, by the way, but Kresse, because that's quite interesting, isn't it? And the aesthetic properties within that fire hose. Yeah. And by the way, anyone who comes to the UK and goes to Croydon, full stop, let alone going to the sewers, has got. Sorry if you're from Croydon, by the way, but but there's aesthetic properties within the material that enable you to replicate what some of the major brands are doing anyway. Is that just luck? And how do you approach the actual design? Because if you've got a Mulberry or Burberry bag, there's a lot of detailing on there that consumers want to buy. And they don't just buy your bags because it's made of fire hose, do they? They like the properties of it, they like the function of it, the aesthetics.
I think one of the interesting things is that we all are focused in a way on aesthetics. And maybe that's why the green movement failed for a really long time, because a lot of the products that were green were also ugly or uncomfortable, and they didn't appeal to magpie-like human beings that wanted something shiny or something interesting. And yeah, I mean, you can love fire hose because it's red. You can love fire hose because you love firemen. Certainly we have a lot of American customers like that. But you can also love it because we don't actually design for seasons. We design classic pieces that you can use for a very long time. And certainly if you order a belt from us and you order another belt from us, we have an automatic email set up that says what happened to the first one. You know, I think we have to reinvent our relationship with the items that surround us. And it doesn't mean, to me, it doesn't mean we necessarily have to have four boxes of packaging that in which everything is packaged and Amazonified or McKinseyfied. It means that we have to apply our creative brains in an entirely different way to do totally awesome mushroom stuff and fire hose stuff and brick stuff and not completely destroy the planet or treat people like crap. It's just, we've been really, really lazy with our creativity. I would love it if we had lots of legislation to tell us that no, we couldn't be so exploitative, because it would just make us be more creative. So I do think a lot of these solutions come down to imagination, and British people are supposed to be super creative, right? You know.
Well, we are, aren't we? Anyway, yeah, we need policy, but we need the right policy. So I agree with you. It's a great constraint. But I'm going to come back to you, my Netherlands friends. So don't worry. Any questions from anyone? It's not any questions. How many questions have we got? Ah, right. Brilliant.
Hiya, my name is Samantha. I work for White Architecture in Stockholm. And I'm really interested actually in that exact question that you put to them about aesthetics and about the question with how architects are seeming to be rejecting what's kind of developed first and they want options. So there is, going back to what you were saying, needing to provide choice and needing to provide, I guess, a variety in order to suit different ways of thinking, different ways of feeling, different ways of how you experience our built environment.
Jasper, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think this question really poses the fact that culture is very important. And I mean, the architects that are sitting here are probably at the forefront of developing something sustainable, but most architects just want to build something really, really beautiful. And if you keep that in mind from our perspective, yeah, we try to help them build something beautiful. And by the way, it's also made from waste. Now, I hope that I can appeal to you by the fact that it's made from waste, and that's good. But I also need to appeal to the people who are not here today and who are at their office just doing another project. And we really see that actually the aesthetics are even more important than the fact that it's made from waste, or depending, of course, on which person is sitting on the other side of the table. But yeah, we hope to kind of, you know, and I think that's also with the bags, you know, making something very beautiful and people are willing to pay for it. If it looks like, oh, it's just, you know, remade and redone with materials just found somewhere and there's no design to it, yeah, then it becomes basically just a pile of crap. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Somebody else?
Brilliant. I love the colloquial. Christian, just, I mean, the staggering amount, 70,000 tons in a year from startup is really impressive. But that model you had where everything was broken down, is there a part of that model that could directly reflect the questioner from Stockholm, the architect, and who wants to engage more in the properties of those materials?
Well, in a way, I mean, aesthetics play an important part because I feel like the transition toward the circular economy is mainly a demand-driven transition. Because in the end, and statistics show this, there is plenty of waste. What there is not is enough demand for waste or for secondary materials. So I think in that sense, it very much plays into aesthetics. But aesthetics is only one element of it. Like, we have a number of tools to make transactions happen on our platform, but there's many more barriers than just aesthetics or beauty or lack thereof. It is also legislation or policy, but it's also, you know, we've been sort of executing this linear economy for many decades, so we see that a lot of organizations, especially big organizations, aren't ready yet to start using secondary materials for quality reasons, for quantity reasons, but also we see that there's issues around timing. When a building is demolished, there's not immediately a demand for the materials coming out of those buildings. That's on the process side. And on the other side, more the organizational side, we see a lack of urgency still. I mean, there's policy coming up, but the politicians, as they are, they put these targets somewhere well into the future to not make, their industries worry too much. And then we see that there is a lack of transparency that make it very difficult for the solutions that are presented today to scale. And so maybe to come back to your question, aesthetics is an element, but there's many more to it that make it difficult for sort of us to make this transition happen. And what we see with our clients, which is a lot of times really big companies, as soon as there's one small hurdle in the road, they're like, oh, forget about it. We'll just stick to the more conventional, comfortable solution.
So I just want, I'll come to you for the last question, but one comment on policy. When you get a bit older, things come around. I'm now getting middle-aged. I'm saying, oh, hang on, I've heard this before. Oh, crikey, 15 years ago. That means I'm getting old. But the policymakers are now saying, so LOWAB, Wayne Hubbard from London Waste Recycling Board actually said he'd like less legislation, the legislators to move away from it a bit and step out of it. I mean, and in the UK, to give you an example, probably 15, 20 years ago, some of you might remember this, we had the National Industrial Symbiosis Programme, which is funded by government, and the whole point was, in effect, what you're doing as a business. So there is an argument to say, well, step out of it, don't use taxpayers' money, let the market determine. It might have taken far too long, but companies like yours seem to be doing it commercially and doing it well. So maybe policymakers should step up.
There are some policies that could help the transition. Specifically, if you look at the EU, which the UK will perhaps soon not be a part of anymore.
Don't start that one.
Is that the way that countries interpret the waste definitions as set by the EU differ, which makes it actually very difficult to sort of exchange waste streams between countries, which of course is necessary if you want to have some sort of specialization on a country basis.
I 100% get that. In medical equipment, that's a nightmare. But we're running out of time. So last question for the man with the best shirt I've seen today. So can you just say where you're from, please?
Lafayette, Louisiana.
The U.S.
Is that on?
Yep.
You got that?
Yeah. You come all the way from America for futurebuild?
No, from Devon. It's a question of. So my question is about moving from the niche to the mainstream. So we've got a big problem with flammable insulation on high-rise buildings. So the question is, why can't we use mycelium, flame-proof mycelium, and what needs, building regs is not ready for cork, mycelium, straw, hempcrete, and so on. So, how do we leapfrog the regime?
So the quick answer to why don't we use mycelium insulation, we will very soon. We're making that happen. We're actually currently going through a scale-up operation where we're looking to develop enough insulation for 20 homes every month. That'll be by the end of this year. In terms of regulations and standards, that has been the biggest barrier for us and for innovation in the material area and construction in general. And as much as legislation can really help in the way that standards can curb innovation and new ways of doing things, it may also be a very big barrier. We've found a way around that by working closely with government all the way through from the very start. One of our team members is actually still working in government at the moment. So the way we've done that is we've been able to work with BSI, the British Standards Institute. We explain to them exactly what's happening and how this is a huge barrier and this can have a huge impact on the industry. And they've offered to look into crowdfunding and use standard using their industry network because they can see the impact of this. And we're working with them to create that new standard. And you're absolutely right in terms of the regulations are not ready for cork and straw and mycelium simply because they're built to test plastic materials. And the tests just do not apply. So we have to completely change that, and the way the standards and regulations are so static at the moment makes it almost impossible to do that quickly. But we can also, again, find ways around it by working around the legislation because we know that our ethos and philosophy will stop us from putting anything in the market that would offer any harm. So we can get one-off accreditations per building and things like that. There's always a way around it.
Right, well, thanks for that. I'm really sorry. We've run out of time. So just what has occurred to me though, it's just like the A team of like designers. I was just thinking to get you guys all to sit around a design challenge. I think it'd be a pretty impressive team. So, but if you could just thank the guys again, that'd be great. Thanks.